Hello, everybody. So I'm back with another uh, audio video of the book Scout Mindset. Joining me today, I have two guests, two of my best friends. Um, Okakura, who I would like to call my philosopher best friend, and I have Kelvin, who is I would like to call my anime best friend, I guess. Would that work, Kelvin, you think? Or Japanese best friend, although you're not Japanese. Um, but, like,
Yeah.
so we have both of them, and what I wanted to do was introduce them to the first chapter of Scout Mindset and then have a discussion about it after each section. There's 6 sections, so we're going to trade off reading each paragraph, and then we're going to give our thoughts after each section. So the order will be Kelvin, Okakura, and then me. And for purposes of me giving a name, my online name is Rave. So there we go. So, all right, Kelvin, go ahead, take it away, and we'll give this a shot.
Okay. So, introduction. When you think of someone with excellent judgment, what traits come to mind? Maybe you think of things like intelligence, cleverness, courage, or patience. Those are all admirable virtues. But there's one trait that belongs to the top of the list that is so overlooked, it doesn't even have an official name.
Oh, is it my turn?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
Yep.
I've given it one. I call it Scout Mindset. The motivation to see things as they are, not as you wish they were.
Scout mindset is what allows you to recognize when you're wrong, to seek out your blind spots, to test your assumptions, and change course. It's what prompts you to honestly ask yourself questions like, was I at fault in that argument? Or is this risk worth it? Or how would I react if someone from the other political party did the same thing? As the late physicist Richard Feynman once said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself. And you are the easiest person to fool.
Our capacity to fool ourselves was a hot topic throughout the 2000s and 2020s. Popular media and best-selling books like How We Know What Isn't So, Predictably Irrational, Why People Believe Weird Things. Mistakes are made, but not by me. You are not so smart. Denialism, why everyone else is a hypocrite. And thinking fast and slow, painting an unflattering picture of a human brain hardwired for self-deception. We rationalize away our flaws and mistakes. We indulge in wishful thinking. We cherry-pick evidence that confirms our prejudices and supports our political tribe.
That picture isn't wrong, but it is missing something. Yes, we often rationalize away our mistakes, but we sometimes acknowledge them too. We change our minds less often than we should, but more often than we could. We're complex creatures who sometimes hide the truth from ourselves and sometimes confront it. This book is about the less explored side of that coin, the times we succeed in not fooling ourselves, and what we can learn from those successes.
Okay, awesome. So, section 1 complete. So, there's a few things that kind of stick out to me, and I want to know what your guys' opinions are on it. She mentions that there's this idea of excellent judgment, and she's given it a name, and she calls it Scout Mindset. The motivation to see things as they are, not as you wish they were. Question to you guys. Is this really the advent of a new idea? Like the motivation to see things as they are, not as you wish they were? Does it need to be named? Or is there already something like that already? I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Well,
Mm,
there's another
I don't
avenue.
know if it's necessarily a new idea. I mean, I'm pretty sure people have thought of it before.
Mm.
I just, if it's being specifically mentioned as a specific name, maybe not so common.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, if you bring in another concept, which is essentially like bias, like she's essentially saying don't see
yeah.
things with a biased perspective because we tend to be people in general tend to like be skewed towards certain things, aka bias. Like you can't like a good example is just like a sports team. Like if you ask someone like about a a foul, like the like your if your team actually did a foul, you're going to argue against it. But if the enemy team, the people that you're going up against, did do a foul, then you're just like, yeah, like freaking throw all the freaking red cards at them. Then yeah, because you want your team to do the best that they can. Like the video that went along with this, the author that did this book, like I actually really like that example of using sports as an analogy,
Hmm.
because people will definitely be more favored towards their team of choice, because you want your cream of the crop, whatever you want to call it, to win, because they're the ones that you kind of invested into.
Hmm.
Right? If you got someone that wasn't invested into sports, like to actually, pick your favorite team out of these two, then you might get a better answer in terms of like, okay, so if you put up two teams against each other, then who would you think would win? And and also when things foul or not foul, they won't be as biased, because they're just like, well, I don't really have a favorite team. And sometimes I'll agree with the call if the referee calls like, that wasn't that's you broke the rules here, but you didn't break the rules here. And you'll definitely get a lot of those people like jeering in the audience in football games, basketball games, whatever sports that are out there, or whatever. But
Hmm. Yeah, so I guess we're in agreement that this idea, it isn't really new, but there is potential that there is reason for her to say like, I'm gonna give this idea a name, and I'm gonna claim it to be called scout mindset kind of thing. Um,
Well, I don't know if necessarily. I mean, it's just kind of, in a way, as Okur said, it's essentially the same thing as what bias is already. So it's a concept that's already out there. It's just kind of like, I think what she's doing is just like giving it kind of, how do I say, um, in some ways, she's not just mentioning the aspect of like bias, but but what she's trying to highlight is the aspect of being able to be conscious of your own biases, which and like to be able to question them. That's what she's actually pointing out, because yes, everybody has biases, but not everybody is good about actually realizing that, like, hey, this is a bias. Maybe I might not be actually correct in going this way or thinking this way, and maybe it's not the truth or that kind of thing. So that's what she's trying to highlight, more so than just the concept of bias itself.
I
yeah,
see.
she's like simplified the concept of bias. Like you can actually, when when you see the word scout mindset, like you can kind of visualize like, oh, I'm scouting ahead, and I'm seeing things as they are, as opposed to like just saying like, oh, you have a biased perspective, which essentially is the same thing, but it's a little bit more abstract, I guess, in terms of in terms of word choice. Because scout mindset, you can kind of visualize like, okay, I'm thinking about a scout. Yes, then what she follows alongside with the definition, it makes sense. But essentially, you can change words like Kelvin mentioned, and it's essentially the same thing, but it's just not as simplified and pretty, I guess.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, there's one word that sticks out to me. Motivation. The motivation to see things as they are. I guess maybe that implies or infers that people aren't motivated to see things as they are. Is that what you guys do? Would you agree with that? Like,
Not necessarily. It's a difference between people. Some people are more interested in seeing things as they are. Some people are just are more like are fine with seeing things the way that they see want to see them. I mean, it's like each person is different in terms of how they deal with this, I feel. Some people are more self-aware, some people are less. Of their own biases. Some people are just plain aren't even aware of the concept of bias in the first place.
Right, right. No, that's true. If you don't even know what it is, how can you know that you're trapped in it, right? So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess that's what she's trying to push then, is to make people be like, wake up, don't try to see things how you want them to be, take a reality pill and just see, try to see things for what they are. And
Red pill, blue pill, Morpheus. Red pill, blue pill.
So okay, and I'll share with you guys things that stuck out to me and that I had questions about. But if you guys have some too, feel free to bring them up after I'm done. But she also mentions this quote. It says by Richard Feynman. He says, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." What do you guys think about that quote? Do you think that has a lot of weight? Do you think that it's true, or do you think it's false?
It's true.
Why?
Yeah, I would agree too.
Why?
It's
Yeah.
she in the next paragraph, like she essentially explains why that quote is very important. It's what is it? Let me see. We cherry pick evidence that confirms our prejudices and supports our political tribe. We indulge in wishful thinking. Yeah, I'm reading it backwards, but yes, as people, we tend to have self defense mechanisms that kind of put us on a pedestal to make sure that we are still in the right. Right being that it's not necessarily like ethical or morally correct, but that we are correct in our thinking, our judgment, our perception that the situation is the way we think it is. Essentially the scout mindset. Like, we're seeing that what we see in front of us is actually what it is and not what we think it is. And we can definitely delude ourselves into thinking like, oh, like, for example, there is a bridge there or there is not a bridge there. We can kind of, if we keep telling ourselves like there is a bridge there to kind of help us out when there actually isn't one, then that can be kind of bad, because that essentially is like kind of the root of like positive thinking, and kind of I think it's written about later on in the chapter in terms of like positive reinforcement and stuff. And it can be okay to a degree, but it won't solve the problem that was there.
So let me give an example here. So, Rave, what if I told you right now, anime is horrible for you?
Okay.
Would you become suddenly defensive? Would you like question it all of a sudden? You'd be like, "Hey, why are you thinking that?"
I would be curious.
Versus if I said,
yeah,
you'd be like, your automatic reaction, probably because you like anime, you'd be like,
right.
I didn't want to question that thought.
Right.
There's no point. How can you think that? That's what you think. How can you even say that to me? I love anime.
I
Versus
think
if somebody said, anime is great for you, you'd be like, yeah, I want to be more friends with you and stuff like that, right?
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, if somebody came at me with an opposite opinion, I'd probably be very curious. Like, wait, why is anime bad? Like, wait, what am I missing? Like, what's going on?
Well, it's more of, if anyone questioned like your passions or your likes, like why of course you would get defensive. Like, if I told you your business sucks, like your wife is ugly, your friends are horrible, like if I told you all those things, you'd be like, what the hell?
Well,
you'd be like, what are you
actually,
thinking? Like,
well, I don't know, because a part of me, I wouldn't really get angry at you guys. I mean, honestly, you could throw it at me, whatever. I'd still be kind of like, I would want to know why you guys think that. Like, oh, okay, so my wife's ugly. What's wrong? Or like, I don't know, because I mean, and then maybe this is just how I am, and maybe we're all different, obviously, but it's like what like I feel like if somebody has an opinion, they have a reason to believe what they believe, right? And I would
I'm
want
not
to ask
saying,
that.
yeah, I agree that you're probably a little bit better than in terms of getting defensive in terms of that kind of stuff, but you still would have a different reaction than if somebody came at
Um,
you with something that actually agreed with you.
right,
Somebody came
right.
at you, if, like they came at you with, "Hey, anime is great." You wouldn't question them. You wouldn't be curious about their
Oh yeah, that's
thoughts as
right. That
much.
is
You'd be
true.
like,
That is true.
right?
You're right.
You have a different reaction,
I would
right?
have a different reaction. I would take it for granted, and I'd be like, "Yep, that's accepted. Let's move forward to the next part," kind of thing.
Right.
That is true. Yeah, I wouldn't be curious because I would be like, "Oh yeah, I believe that," so I have no reason to question it. And maybe
Exactly.
that's maybe what she's also pointing out is that maybe we should be a little bit more careful about how we look at things
Yeah.
because maybe
It's not just a
objectively.
matter of questioning what other people think that is against you, but also questioning your own things that
Yeah.
maybe you're incorrect about your thoughts.
Would any of
Things
you
that you already
yeah
assume are correct.
would any of us though be willing to question our um I don't know morality or like the righteousness or the wrongness of watching anime though? That there's even that too because maybe all of us would be like, why would I even question if it's bad? Like I like it, so it doesn't matter if it's bad or not, right? Um,
Well, it's kind of like fast food. It's just like you know it's bad for you, but you get it anyways because you're hungry. I want to eat something. I don't feel like cooking. Like I just want to freaking have something to eat. Like swipe my card. I'm done. Like I can get my food.
right. That is an
It's
excellent
I
point.
guess it's kind of
Yeah.
like the path of least resistance. Like a lot of I believe that the path of least resistance is probably the most preferred thing, just because like why would I need to go into conflict or think about like, oh, I don't really need to think about certain things. Like
Right.
people should know that fast food is bad for you, but you still get it anyways. Like
Right.
freaking
Right. Right.
same thing with
Exactly.
smoking or all that other stuff. You know it's bad, but you still do it anyways because it feels good, or you know, yeah, essentially that it just feels good.
And that's the interesting thing is that I have read a little bit further into the book, but she also mentions later that just because you know things or just because you're more knowledgeable about things doesn't mean you're going to make the right choices. There's a difference between knowing information and actually making the best decision, kind of thing. Um, which is, I think is just is true because some people they just like what they like and no matter what you say they're not going to change it. Um, unless unless it was dire. Like if you knew for some reason that if you watched anime the next week you were going to drop dead. For I don't know, weird thing. But unless it was that severe, I don't think there'd be anything that would stop you otherwise. I think if that makes any
If
sense.
you're to go to watch that anime movie, then you will get COVID.
Right. So, yeah.
Well, I guess put it this way: would you consider people who watch anime a good person of character? Like, do they have excellent judgment? Like, are they intelligent? Are they
Oh
clever?
man. Yeah. I feel like ooh, that's a good question. I feel like it's nuanced. My answer to that is because I feel like people who watch anime, I do think a lot of them they're highly intelligent actually. But I also feel like because a lot of them are also not socially like they're a bit socially kind of awkward sometimes. It may appear that they're what am I trying to say? They might give off the wrong impression or something like that, if that makes any sense.
Well, that's well. You just kind of described kind of like a bias thing. Like you kind of stereotype the typical anime watcher to be like socially inept or socially awkward or whatever. But what if we had someone like what if our president Joe Biden watched anime?
Huh.
Like, would you call him socially inept? or awkward or whatever.
Um, obviously, I don't think he is because he became president, so he has to have some, adequacy in terms of interacting socially and stuff. So, um, no, of course not. Yeah.
But why exactly did you think that people who watch anime are socially awkward? What if there are some freaking social Casanovas in there?
I know a few. Uh, so yeah. Again, it's weird when you try to like put a blanket statement on people because there's always going to be outliers. I think, um, but yeah, um,
Yeah, because I think what or at least from what I get from this whole scout mindset, like we kind of need a basis to work off of.
hmm,
Like you can't really come up with something without actually having previous knowledge to some degree.
right, right,
Because it's just like you kind of have to build blocks from something. Like even if it's a biased perspective, it's something compared to um, kind of like learning it fresh.
right, right. Got it. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. No, I think I've got all my questions out of the way for this first section. Um, do any of you guys have anything you wanted to point out that stuck out to you, or we good to move on to the next part? What do you guys think?
I think I'm personally fine with it.
Fine with me.
Okay. So yeah, so it seems like there's some really good things that she kind of points out. So here's the next part. Yeah, we'll hand it over to Kelvin for this next part.
Okay, my path to this book began in 2009 after I quit graduate school and threw myself into a passion project that became a new career, helping people reason out tough questions in their personal and professional lives. At first, I imagined that this would involve teaching people about things like probability, logic, and cognitive biases, and showing them how those subjects apply to everyday life. But after several years of running workshops, reading studies, doing consulting, and interviewing people, I finally came to accept that knowing how to reason wasn't the cure-all I thought it was.
Knowing that you should test your assumptions doesn't automatically improve your judgment, and more than knowing you should exercise automatically improves your health. Being able to rattle off a list of biases and fallacies doesn't help you unless you're willing to acknowledge those biases and fallacies in your own thinking. The biggest lesson I learned is something that's since been corroborated by researchers, as we'll see in this book. Our judgment isn't limited by knowledge nearly as much as it's limited by attitude.
None of which is to say that I'm a perfect example of scout mindset, by the way. I rationalize away mistakes. I avoid thinking about problems. I get defensive in response to criticism. More than once during my research for this book, I realized I had essentially wasted an interview because I spent it trying to convince my interviewee that my thesis was correct, instead of trying to understand their point of view. The irony of my being closed minded during an interview about open mindedness is not lost on me.
But I'm better than I used to be, and you can be too. That's the aim of this book. My approach has 3 prongs.
Okay, before we continue, there's only two things that I'm really wondering about. The idea of our judgment isn't limited by knowledge nearly as much as it's limited by attitude. What does that mean to you guys? I'm curious.
Well, essentially, if you're closed minded, then you're not going to learn as much because you're kind of tossing away every idea that's like thrown at you just because like, oh, I think it's wrong, or I think this is not the right thing. Like, I guess if you're more negative, you tend to deny more stuff. At least that's how I would feel.
So, is it more of like an optimist versus a pessimist kind of thing, you think?
Well, think
Yeah.
of it this way: if if you're to attend a calculus class and you go into it being like, yeah, I really want to learn calculus. How much calculus would you learn compared to if you went in there and like, calculus is useless for my life?
Yeah, good point. If you go in not really wanting to do anything, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Right? Which is what he means. What she means by like attitude is more important than knowledge. Like, no matter, this is regardless of whether you go in already knowing how much math you already know or whatever. It's like your attitude will have a huge effect on how much you actually get out of said class. Is if you're going being like, this is a waste of my time.
Right.
It really is going to be a waste of your time. If you go in there being like, hey, this is like going to move myself forward in my life, I really need to learn this, you're going to put yourself into it and you're going to learn a lot, right?
And I guess that's the idea of like how it affects your judgment. Because if you go in with a specific attitude, it will affect how you decide to do certain things. Kind of like even in this podcast, I guess, the way that we decide how we're going to go about, analyzing this book and stuff. Yeah, I can see that. Another thing that I found really interesting is that the author mentions that she is, she's not a perfect example of scout mindset, and she does a lot of like these same mistakes, and this book isn't about, being perfect or anything, but it's just so that you can improve in terms of, where you might be already. Question to both of you guys: do you consider your mindset to already be kind of like scout mindset? And if you do, like if you don't, then okay, whatever. But if you do, then do you think a book like this would still be of use or end up helping you? Because you already, if you do have it, then why would you need to read a book like this kind of thing?
I'd say I'm kind of neutral towards it, mostly because it'll be interesting to just learn a different kind of point of view. Normally, I would say it would be useless because the way I tend to think about things is, or at least in terms of like, in terms of I'm not sure how I want to put those, but usually it's based on situations and perspectives, and this perspective is not really as useful as it could be, because it could be kind of like it's kind of putting a spin to what I kind of currently already know, or at least am working on, in terms of just trying to thinking outside the box, not being biased in any way, or just kind of getting a feel of like, okay, this is what should be in front of me, not what I want it to be. But yeah, I mean, I'm always open to new perspectives, regardless. And I'd probably read a couple of chapters just to see if if it does fit my fancy. Like, I guess referring back to anime, like the way most people tend to figure out if they want to watch a series or not is you'll watch the first couple of episodes. If it doesn't draw you in, if you don't really like it, then you'll drop it. Unless it's a series that you've been waiting for a long time, then yeah, what we talked about earlier, like you're motivated to actually want to watch this series, so you'll definitely watch it even if it sucks.
Right. Motivation. Huh.
On my end, in terms of like whether I already have scout mindset or not, I would say with anything, it's kind of a spectrum of things. It's like every individual person probably is like yeah, kind of like on that spectrum of scout mindset versus I think the other side was soldier mindset. Like every person is going to be somewhere along that spectrum of like fully scout mindset and fully soldier mindset. Nobody's going to be it'd probably be almost impossible to find somebody that's 100% on one side versus
Right,
the other.
right, right.
And this also probably depends on the situation too. Is like what a specific argument. Some people get more passionate about some things than they are about other things. Like they might be more willing to be more flexible and more scout mindset, like in certain areas than they would be in others. Talk to somebody that is a huge sports fanatic about sports, about their favorite team, and they'll probably be super soldier mindset with that. If you talk
Right,
about
right.
them about something else that they don't really care about as much, it might be, yeah, I'm okay with looking at either way or things. I'd be more scout mindset with that. So it's not just a matter of how, like, just a single person is fully really how that mindset or soldier mindset. It also depends on what you're talking about with them.
Ah.
Like each person is going to be various places in the spectrum with every single different argument. So personally, I think in terms of myself, I think I do have a little bit more awareness of my biases, and it's I tend to try to be a bit more scout mindset-y, but I am, as she mentions about herself, I'm not perfect in it either. I know I have my own biases, and I'm not very great about like turning them all over, like changing my complete thought process around for every single little argument that comes around. I'm not going to do that. So it's, but likewise, is kind of being able to question my own thoughts and recognize when certain areas I'm incorrect. I do try to do that at times. So it's not that I'm 100% self mindset either. It's like it all depends on the situation, I think.
Wow. And do you believe that anything from this book would be of good use or helpful for you? Or do you think, kind of like Okakura, that I think I'm already good as I am and it's kind of useless, but I guess I'll give it a shot? Or do you think, where do you fall in terms of that? I'm curious.
I think in some ways it can be useful. Any piece of knowledge from anybody can be useful. It all depends on kind of how you take it. Um,
Attitude,
like
right? It
yeah,
depends on your attitude. Wow,
exactly.
interesting.
So it's so I mean, it's like I'm not going to just throw out what she says as like, oh yeah, it's not useful to me. Um, exactly how useful it would be to me is dependent upon how I take it and how I incorporate it into my own thought processes. But that's just dependent on each individual person will find certain things to be more useful or less useful than others.
Right.
So,
Okay, that's cool. I think that's very interesting, and I think those are two questions that I think are really important, especially when you read any kind of book and you see what they're trying to present. Is it something you know already and that you really need to read the book about, or is this something that might be new or might be useful? Because sometimes we can read things without even thinking about why we're reading it or if it's even going to be of use to us, but if we kind of like go in and be like, okay, like, well, I think I know this already, or you know what, I don't know this already. Let's see what's going on. It changes how like you process the information, I think.
and there's always the case of sometimes you can't really judge things by the first few episodes.
that
There's
Sometimes
there's
that's
it
always a
starts off
surface
cool,
level.
like
There's always
you
a
don't
surface.
really think it's going to be that great,
yeah,
turns into something amazing after you keep on sticking with it. So you never know.
that's a good point. Good point. Um,
Sometimes the exact opposite also happens, where something starts out amazing and then you're like, but it's horrible by the time you finish it.
right, right, exactly.
Those long episodes of like Dragon Ball, One Piece, Inuyasha. It's like, please, just give me the meat and potatoes.
Right, right. Cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll move on to the next section. Okay, so there's three prongs that she presents. Um, and that's the aim of this book. So I'll just read off the three prongs. One is realize that truth isn't in conflict with your other goals. Two, learn tools that make it easier to see clearly. And 3, appreciate the emotional rewards of Scout mindset. So those are the 3 prongs. So I guess we'll check out this first prong. Kelvin, take it away.
Many people actively resist viewing reality accurately because they believe that accuracy is a hindrance to their goals. But if they want to be happy, successful, and influential, it's better to view themselves and the world through a distorted lens.
Part of my goal in writing this book was to set the record straight. There was a lot of myths out there about self-deception, some of which have been promoted by prestigious scientists. For example, maybe you've seen one of the many articles and books claiming that studies show that self-deception is part of mental health, and that seeing the world realistically only leads to depression. In Chapter 7, we'll examine the questionable research behind those claims and discover how psychologists fooled themselves about the benefits of positive thinking.
Ooh, okay. Or maybe you hold the common belief that when you're doing something hard, like starting a company, you need to be delusionally overconfident. You might be surprised to learn that some of the world's most famous entrepreneurs expected their companies to fail. Jeff Bezos put Amazon's probability of success at about 30%. Elon Musk estimated a 10% chance of success for each of his companies, Tesla and SpaceX. In Chapter 8, we'll come to understand their reasoning and why it's valuable to have a clear-eyed picture of the odds you're facing.
Or perhaps you share this widespread sentiment. Sure, being objective is a good thing if you're a scientist or a judge. But if you're an activist trying to change the world, you don't need objectivity. You need passion. In fact, as we'll see in Chapter 14, Scout mindset complements passion. We'll travel back to the height of the AIDS crisis in the 1990s. Discover why Scout mindset was so crucial to activist success in stopping the epidemic.
Okay, so there are a few things here that I think were just really interesting. Some of these things I've talked to both of you guys, each like individually, like just on like one-on-one sessions. But I find it very interesting that in the second paragraph, she puts in quotations, "studies show," and she's like, "You probably heard of studies show." Quotation marks. Kelvin, you probably know what I'm going to say. We were talking about this a while ago, before I even, like months ago, about how you have to kind of be really careful about when people say studies show. That surprised me when I read that. I'll be honest. I was thinking about you. I was like, oh my god. Whoa. She actually put that down. What do you think about that? I'm just kind of curious.
Again, is kind of, it's a very common thing. So it's like, I'm not surprised that she would do that. Everybody kind of, like most people, and they write things like this, they will write words like that. In terms of kind of the aspect that you're kind of pointing out, though, is that we talked about before, is the fact that we don't know what studies she's talking about. What is her basis for so-and-so claims? Like while she references certain studies and stuff like that, she's not giving an actual like bibliography of like, hey, this is the study that I referenced. This is the study that I referenced, so that it can actually be corroborated in terms of like whether or not those studies are actually solid studies that actually give any kind of credence to her statements. Again, whether anybody can write these kind of lines, and like that mean that like in terms of things like this is, yes, you have to be careful when you see things like that, but likewise, it doesn't necessarily mean that the claims are wrong either. It also doesn't necessarily mean that the claims are correct.
Right.
So it's like you just have to be kind of careful when you see kind of statements like this is as like, for instance, this whole thing with Scout mindset is, if you actually were to see an article that corroborates what you said, then you'd be like, oh yeah, it's fine. I don't need to go and look carefully at what studies they mention. But if you found something that was against what you said or what you think,
Mm.
like maybe I need to take a closer look at what studies they're mentioning.
Right. Exactly. It's almost like,
try to
okay,
try to see whether or not it's truly strong or not, kind of thing.
so it's more like
So
we're more critical when it
yeah,
comes to the other side when it's not like our side. And what's funny is
Yeah,
that she did
yeah,
mention earlier that she's all about she did an interview about open-mindedness, but at the same time she had an argument with the interviewee about like the thesis of her statement in the first place. And it's interesting because even though it was about open-mindedness, it's still like there were two sides of an argument, taking
yeah.
place.
Usually, when you're presenting data like this, like you usually have some studies that kind of back up your claim just to make sure, like, hey, I'm right, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're right. It just means that
hmm
I found something that kind of agrees with my point of views,
Uh-huh.
and therefore,
yeah.
this kind of unconsciously submits that, like, hey, this is the right way to look at things, or this is the right way, you know to kind
Mm.
of reinforce to reinforce like her thesis or whatever. Like, yeah, studies show like this. Like,
Yeah.
you'll
What
definitely
about the
see.
studies that showed the exact opposite, though? There probably
Yeah,
are.
You're right.
yeah, there probably are plenty of stuff like there's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of like businesses or and analytics or like somewhere in that division where it's just like, yeah, the numbers show that this is happening, but there could be a lot of other things happening too that we don't really see. We all we see are just numbers.
Right. It's almost like you cherry pick, the whole idea of cherry picking. And when you cherry pick, you can be blindsided or you can be delusional. And this is a book about being less delusional. So I don't know.
Yeah. In fact,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
what are those two examples that she gave of Elon Musk and who was the other person?
Oh, Jeff Bezos.
Jeff
Yeah,
Bezos.
yeah.
Jeff
Actually,
Bezos.
yeah. I
That's cherry
actually
picking. Cherry picking evidence.
that is cherry picking evidence. And I wanted to actually ask you, Okakura, because I asked the first question to Kelvin, but I know you. You told me that when you make decisions of what to invest your money in, you try to make very intelligent decisions with blue collar stocks, I believe it's called, where it has a strong identity and like you have a probability, there's a high probability that like you think they'll succeed. I'm really curious about what you think about these two founders and their evaluation of their company. I mean, obviously it says here Elon Musk estimated 10% chance of success and Jeff Bezos 30% chance of success. Um, as somebody who kind of like understands or is looking into the market and uses that to place in a weird way, not your bets, but you kind of
It's still speculative
mm,
thinking if you're investing in the market. Like, you're still betting that these blue collared stocks or blue well, it's not blue collar, but blue chip stocks are gonna be household names still in the future.
mm,
And it's definitely hard to argue that these names will be overtaken by something else. Like your Amazons, your Netflixes, your Targets, Costco's, Starbucks. Like, yeah, we can name a hundreds of companies that are very distinguished, very uh, uh, accomplished names that kind of iterate the point of, yeah, it seems like it's not a bad investment, but uh, like during the pandemic times, things shifted. Like, some of the blue chip stocks kind of fell
mm,
because other ones started getting favored, specifically like tech stocks. Like, they jumped up by a huge margin because people had to use them for communication, for business, for whatever reasons they needed to use it. But yeah, like that kind of influenced why tech stocks did so well during the pandemic age.
mm,
And as we're reopening the economy, like retail stocks, or not really retail stocks, but like consumer stocks and all that other stuff are starting to rise again, and tech stocks are actually declining. But there's definitely people on both sides that kind of argue their points of like tech is still something good to invest in as opposed to customer or consumer stuff. And yeah, it really depends on what you yourself prefer is a good investment,
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
what you prefer. Like I'm more of a tech person, so obviously I would invest more in the tech companies because I believe technology is the future.
Right.
Just the way how things are going.
Yeah,
As
I actually was wondering, like, you see, like, in this example, you see that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, they give themselves pretty low percentage. I mean, it's even lower than 50%. Do you think that there is actually, like, I know it's cherry picking because obviously these two fit for the argument, but do you think that there is some credit, or there's something behind them, like, almost underestimating their company and the correspondence to, like, how successful they are? Do you think it doesn't really matter, or do you think it is good to maybe underestimate yourself when you take these bets or you take a chance with something?
So before we keep on going with that, I want to actually also put in my thoughts in terms of this. Is you also have to keep in mind timing in terms of their thoughts about this. They're not necessarily saying that they thought that Amazon is like say 30% chance for successful now. They're talking about
Back
back
then.
when
Right, right, right.
Amazon was first not even a well-known name, when they were still a
Right,
little startup,
right,
and like just making their first web page, and like the consumer like adding in their first goods onto it. The thoughts was that it was maybe only a 30% chance that it would turn into anything big. Not even necessarily big, but that it would even like be a business that could even stay afloat in the first place.
right, right,
Not a matter of whether it would even become big.
right.
So that's a very different landscape than
That is
it
true.
is now, where they
Yeah.
already have a huge customer base. They're
Right.
well known across the world, and I mean, their chances of success right
Right
now,
now, probably a
today,
lot
is
higher.
really high. Like, it's not
Right,
30%.
right, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
back
So I guess the question is, do you think there's merit, like when you're starting a business, to like underplay yourself rather than overplay, like these two?
Were they underplaying themselves? I
just
Ooh,
mean, I'm
that's
not.
interesting.
I personally don't. I think they maybe were underplaying themselves. Maybe they were even overestimating their chances of success back then.
Oh,
yeah, we
really?
can't really know what they were
Yeah.
thinking back then.
Uh
Other
huh.
like they can say like statements on like yeah we weren't expecting this to happen, but I mean that's what they've said in interviews, and like you can't really expect to believe the interviews
Huh.
I mean, I'm not
100%.
necessarily just saying what, like, whether or not that's really what they said, thought or not back then. I'm saying that maybe it really was only a 30% chance of success that Amazon back then would be successful.
Ah.
We look at the results now and
Right,
we
right,
think,
right.
oh yeah,
Yeah, it's easier to
there
say things
definitely would
in
be
hindsight.
successful.
Right, right,
But
right.
honestly, how many different kind of companies like Amazon were there back then? What was the chances that Amazon, specifically Amazon, was the one that came out successful?
Ah.
I mean, I for when did eBay come out?
Oh yeah, that's. I
I don't
think
even
it's been.
remember.
Yeah, I think it's been around before. I think Amazon. Um,
Yeah, it might have been before Amazon.
well, yeah, a good example of this is actually Yahoo, a company that you used to work with, Kelvin. Like before, in the very
Yeah.
beginning, Yahoo was the craze, right? That was like
Yeah.
the Google back then, but then it changed, and you
Yeah.
know, like that is a good point. Like over time, we change our opinions about the percentages of the probability of success of what we expect with things, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
I'm glad AOL is
another example that I thought of was AOL.
AOL. Yeah,
Oh,
I
oh
was just about to say
God.
that. Like, I'm glad they're not around. uh,
It was
no
huge back
no
when we
shade
were
at
little
them. No shade at
kids.
them. They had
Yeah.
some very memorable stuff that happened, but like I guess comparing back then to now, it's like it's a fossil. It and who knows like. I mean, when you're starting out, you're still learning a lot of stuff. It's just kind of like how exactly do you kind of continue to move forward and grow, as opposed to kind of just writing stuff. A good example would be freaking Blockbuster versus Netflix. Like Blockbuster, you know, call me a boomer, but like freaking, renting out movies, like physical discs and stuff. Renting out videos and games. Like you don't even need to do that anymore in today's age.
Right.
Like you just go to Netflix, you just pay for a Netflix subscription. You have an entire library, and you don't have to freaking drive out to a freaking store and interact with a potentially pissed off freaking employee because they got yelled at by their manager or something.
Right. Right. That is true. Yeah. Bringing this all back to full circle, the first prong is realize that truth isn't in conflict with your other goals. So basically, I guess when you want to sum this all up, it's the idea that when you view things truthfully, a lot of people think that you might be, I guess, intimidated, or it might interfere with your goals, but the truth doesn't necessarily have to conflict with your goals. Do you guys believe that statement is a strong one, or do you think there's maybe some loopholes to that, or like, I don't know, any fallacies to that?
I personally think it's kind of a case by case. I mean, there are definitely cases where knowing the truth, like blindly finding out the truth for everything, can actually kind of be detrimental. But likewise, some other times where knowing the truth is definitely going to move you forward more than if you don't know it. So
it's not a black and white thing. It really is a nuanced thing.
I mean, it's like if you want to have a happy marriage, and it's like, you find out this ugly truth that it's like your wife did some kind of like drugs in the past or something like that. Maybe that might affect your marriage.
Well, there you go.
Right?
I mean, I can't really argue with that.
Yeah, it's like knowing the whole truth is not necessarily going to be a good thing for your marriage there.
But
likewise,
on the flip side, if you knew about it before rather than after, then that would do good to have maybe the ultimate goal, which is to marry the right person, right? Like being
Maybe.
devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah, in some cases it might help, because if you both kind of, it just proves that both of you are open. Like, oh yeah, I fucked up in the past, but we're still okay with each other. Like, that can be helpful. But on the other hand, it could be wrong. It could be bad, because it's just like, maybe you might have some unfortunate accidents that might put some strains on their relationship, and then you have to file for a divorce or something, and that would definitely be detrimental. And I definitely prefer the former, but yeah, as Kelvin said, it's a case by case thing. You can't really expect for things to go happily. You can get happy ends all the time. Like there will be groups of people that will run into that brick wall of, oh, we're gonna have to file for a divorce now. I just didn't find the right one. Like, you might have been a bit too hasty. And there are some other cases where we're happy about it. Like, freaking it's just a case by case thing. Like, we can't really encase the whole thing into one. Like, we can't condense this whole thing into one shoe.
Right, yeah, so I guess it really is a very nuanced thing. It's not really as black and white as she kind of makes it out to be, I think. I think we can agree with that. Okay, yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, so here we go. Next part. Learn tools that make it easier to see clearly. All right, Kelvin. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I've packed this book with concrete tools you can use to get better at scout mindset. For example, how can you tell when your own reasoning is biased? It's not as simple as just asking yourself, am I biased? In Chapter 3, you will learn through thought experiments like the outsider test, the selective skeptic test, and the conformity test to examine your reasoning about what you believe and what you want.
How do you decide how certain you are about a particular belief? In Chapter 6, we'll practice some introspection techniques that will help you pin down your level of certainty from 0 to 100%, and train you to recognize what it feels like when you're making a claim you don't really believe.
Hmm. Do you ever try to listen to the other side of an issue and find yourself getting frustrated or angry? That might be because you're approaching it the wrong way. In Chapter 12, I'll share some pointers that make it much easier to learn from opposing perspectives. Okay, for this section, I don't think we really need to go over it that much. I feel like it's pretty, you know, uh, clear cut that, there's some tools that, she's going to have in this book and it's going to help you see clearly. So for me, I don't feel like there needs to be any in depth analysis about this, but I don't know. What about you guys? What do you think?
Nope.
No, nothing on my end.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to the next part. 3. Appreciate the emotional rewards of scout mindset. And I know we probably could talk about this. Anyways, yeah, here we go.
Concrete tools are important, but I'm also hoping to leave you with something more. Facing reality with all its uncertainty and disappointments might seem bleak, but as you peruse this book's examples of scouts, my term for people especially good at some aspects of scout mindset, even though nobody is perfect, you'll notice that they don't seem depressed. For the most part, they're calm, cheerful, playful, and resolute.
That's because even though it may not be obvious from the outside, scout mindset is emotionally rewarding. It's empowering to be able to resist the temptation to self-deceive and to know that you can face reality even when it's unpleasant. There's an equanimity that results from understanding risk and coming to terms with the odds you're facing. And there's a refreshing lightness in the feeling of being free to explore ideas and follow the evidence wherever it leads, unconstrained by what you're supposed to think.
Learning to appreciate these emotional rewards is what makes scout mindset stick. To that end, I've woven into this book some of my favorite inspiring examples of scouts who have helped me and others cultivate scout mindset over the years. We can keep going and finish up this last part too. Yeah.
Our journey will take us through the worlds of science, business, activism, politics, sports, cryptocurrency, and survivalism. We'll dip our toes in the culture wars, the mommy wars, and the probability wars. Along the way, we'll unlock the answers to puzzles such as, why did the sight of a peacock's tail make Charles Darwin sick? What made a professional climate change skeptic switch sides? Why do some victims of cult-like pyramid schemes manage to extract themselves while others stay stuck?
This book is not a rant about how irrational people are, nor is it an attempt to scold you into thinking correctly. It's a tour of a different way of being, one that's rooted in an appetite for truth, and one that's both useful and fulfilling, and in my opinion, woefully underappreciated. I'm excited to share it with you.
All right. Awesome. So there's a few things about this that I feel are worth discussing. One is the merits of this particular mindset. She claims that doing this, and this is funny, Kelvin, because I'm thinking about the happiness articles that you shared with me a long time ago. I'm thinking about the happiness articles by Michael Floydice. I'm thinking about what she's putting out here, and I feel like this. I'm wondering because I'm thinking, does it kind of like correlate or corroborate what we read with the happiness articles? Do you think it does? I'm curious about what you think about that, Kelvin.
I think it does in some ways. So keep in mind that with the happiness fundamentals, that there's two aspects that probably correspond with this. One is the be yourself, which also corresponds with knowing yourself.
Oh.
And there's also the aspect of having a positive, develop positive thinking. So, like it might feel like one is like develop positive thinking is kind of against this,
Uh-huh.
while the know yourself one is sort of for this. In some ways, I feel like they're both kind of corresponding with this in some ways. Definitely the know yourself aspect of the fundamental kind of corresponds with this because what a key aspect of that one is like having a realistic view of yourself and like of your own faults, of your own like good traits and bad traits, which is something that like the happiness fundamental mentions that like happy people tend to not be like blindly like only see their strengths and not their faults, as some people might think, but instead they actually have a very how do I say like full view of not only their strengths but also their faults, and it's because they know themselves so well that they're able to actually kind of handle things more correctly, and that ends up resulting in more happiness. So that's one aspect of the fundamentals that I feel like kind of corresponds with this. In terms of the develop positive thinking kind of thing, um, it might sound like that one kind of is against this, and in some ways it might be, but likewise, kind of an overall aspect of that one is more kind of just a way of looking at events that happen than it is about like kind of like biases or not. Kind of the idea of that one was like the example that they gave was looking at kind of a single person going through a day. If two people went through the exact same day and one person was super negative about it, like, oh, that was a horrible day. It's like I went through the park and like there were these noisy kids running around, and then that person's gonna have a bad day, right? Versus the other person who had the exact same day, they went through the park and like, oh, those are such super cute kids and stuff like that, and they have a good day. So it's like they both saw. It's not really a biased thing in that case. It's more just kind of an attitude of like, hey,
I see.
like, a way of like feeling about the day than it is about like biases or things like that that this author is talking about.
Wow. No, I see exactly what you mean. You know, one is about like a whole change in attitude, and that's kind of what this is about, is like changing your attitude about things. And the second one about just being very aware of yourself and knowing, being able to judge yourself fairly. Which I think
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because I think that segues into something that I joke around with Okakura a lot. Okakura took a narcissism test and he got a perfect 50%, which means that he's like not too narcissistic and he's like not like completely like, you know, self-depreciating. He's like right in the middle. And knowing that, I kind of want to ask you, Okakura, because it's this idea of knowing yourself well and knowing yourself fairly, and being a good judge of your own character, your weaknesses, your strengths, and everything. Do you think that having that 50% or being very fair with yourself and trying to see things realistically, that it does make you a happier, more cheerful, playful kind of person? Is that true for you? Or what do you think about that?
I'd say the calm and resolute is probably true.
Hmm.
The cheerful and playful definitely depend on what happens during the day. Or, like, if I pretty much have the day that I kind of envision
Hmm.
uh, of what's going to happen, then yeah, I can usually kind of be okay with whatever happens because it's just like, okay, so I planned for, all this stuff to happen, then I'm fine with it. I'm okay. So, to some degree, yes, it's essentially scouting ahead. Like I essentially like scout my day in terms of like, okay, so I'm gonna work today. This is what I'm gonna do for food, for dinner and lunch. I'm gonna do these couple of things for errands. Take some notes. Watch a couple of YouTube videos to wind down, whether they be educational or kind of dumb stuff like that. But yeah, it definitely is very handy, I guess, knowing myself to the point where I know how I'm going to react to certain situations. But when it comes to like really on random stuff, it can definitely be a little detrimental or off-putting since it's not something I personally accounted for in terms of like oh, the perfect day will be this, but then let's say I get into a car accident or something. Of course, I'm gonna be freaking like I'm gonna be feeling a whole lot of emotions because, how did I get in this car wreck in the first place? Like, screw the person who ran into me, or, was I not really paying attention, or whatever. Like, my mind will be all over the place. And it's kind of hard to kind of ground myself. It'll definitely take me a while, but yeah. Um, it definitely does feel nice being kind of well balanced,
Hmm.
to answer your question.
Yeah, I feel like, and I think it's okay to disclose this. Well, I won't put out exact numbers, but it shows in your bank account. I think for what you do, like you, because of your judgment when it comes to the decisions you've made financially, you're a lot more ahead than, we'll just say, let's see, I'm doing some quick math. So let's say you're about 6 times more well off than what they say the average millennial, is. Um, I think that's correct. So 6, 7, or yeah, but or yeah, yeah. So you've really been able to get there though, because I think when you make those judgment calls and you decide in what to invest, you you look at it, you look at the reality of it. You don't quote unquote bullshit yourself, and you reap the benefits of it, because when you do face reality, you're more apt to make the correct decision in what to invest in and what to, put yourself into, and that ends up making you happier too overall. Would you stand by that?
Yeah, it definitely took a while to kind of build up these habits and mindset of like, oh, you need to do this every month to make sure you're on track to where you want to be. And it's definitely been helpful. I'm glad that discipline is definitely a huge merit to, like, I guess, my lifestyle. And yeah, I guess, being able to accomplish what I have so far has been emotionally rewarding. So yeah, basically, you just just be resolute, be very mindful of yourself in terms of spending, and yeah, you'll definitely get to where you want to be.
Yeah, like Kelvin, do you feel like you've gained any like benefits by looking at things for like an unbiased way, and making like really good judgment calls by not quote unquote bullshitting yourself or deluding yourself in things?
Definitely. I mean, if you asked anybody that question, I think they would answer yes.
I guess it's part of your ego
I don't
too,
think
right?
that's
So it's
a
like, yeah, we all
question.
think of ourselves in a good light. So I mean, maybe it is kind of a, yeah, good point. Sometimes you gotta question the question
I,
too, right?
it's a question that I don't really know of anybody that would. Don't think most people would answer with a no, anyways.
Or okay, let's actually flip it, because I think maybe you have a point. Maybe it's more interesting to go about it the other way, because I don't want to set it up a certain way. So, do you know any time where you did learn the truth about something and it worked against you?
Worked against me. Hmm. I mean, I'm pretty certain that there's places where it's like I've learned little true things that it's like didn't really mesh with what I thought, and I kind of incorporate them into what I thought.
Hmm.
It's a little hard for me to think of a specific example off the top of my head because they tend to be like little things here and there that it's like I'll just notice and it'll be like, oh, maybe that didn't really mesh. Maybe I should incorporate it in or something like that. Um,
Well, I can
it's
say,
hard for me to think
I
of
can
like a
say, I
concrete
told
example
myself,
right now.
you suck at saving money. Get better.
So that would be one. That's interesting. Um, wait. But learning that truth, like that could be bad though, because wouldn't that be good? Because you're like, oh yeah, I do suck. So now I'm gonna start saving, and then you start saving, and then it ends up being a good thing in the end. So that would be beneficial, right? If you knew the truth.
Yeah. I guess the closest thing would probably be personality checks, potentially. Well, actually, no, that's still beneficial.
Yeah, see, it's a hard. It's almost like a. I'm even thinking maybe the book is setting it up so that, like, of course you'll agree with me because who could deny this? But now I'm like, wait, can we deny it? Um, that is. Is it really that hard of a question? Uh,
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily that it's like the truth is bad for you. Like I think the original thing that we were trying to prove is whether or not like not knowing your it's more the way we framed it was like knowing yourself, knowing like that you're knowing your own kind of strengths and weaknesses and stuff, like whether it's a good or bad thing for you. Like and in terms of that, it's like I think it's very hard to find somebody that would say that like knowing your like maybe sometimes you might be able to find some people that are like, yeah, I'd prefer not to know my weaknesses.
oh,
Um,
right. Yeah.
like that might be something that you'd be able to find, but like trying to find somebody that's like, hey, it's like I don't want to know what my strengths are. That would be kind of weird.
Right. Exactly.
But some people do want to be kind of like very lopsided in terms of their self view, in terms of not like being turning a blind eye to their own weaknesses.
Mm.
Like some people might be like somewhat socially inept, and they'd be like I don't care. It's like it's just other people that like it's the fact that other people are too annoying or something like
You,
that, instead of thinking that they're socially inept.
you know what? Actually, I think I finally I came up with something. Now that you said that, Kelvin, you're right. I feel like there are people who, if we were to make this into an easier question, it would be like, is it really okay to be delusional about yourself or delusional about your belief? Does it ever work to your benefit to be delusional? And that could definitely be a hard yes. I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
because some people, they don't want to. Maybe they were traumatized before, right? And like maybe it's
Mhm.
better that they live in a world where they believe that things are nice, even if the reality is that they might be in a very very terrible situation, maybe like even an abusive situation or something. At least they can be happy living their life in delusion rather than facing the reality and feeling like crap their entire life until they die, kind of thing. Is that kind of like, would you guys say that that's a strong
It's
point
kind
to
of
make?
somewhat an extreme example that
Yeah.
works. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there are less extreme examples you could find out there. But yes, that's a semi-extreme example that would work.
I don't know, man. Freaking, that situation you put reminded me of a Sailor Moon movie. I watched like religiously.
Oh, really? I'm curious.
Yeah. Essentially, what happens is that the villain kidnaps a bunch of kids and sends them into an eternal sleep world where they pretty much have everything they wanted. Like, whatever their dreams were, essentially were granted.
Oh.
So uh, Sailor Moon's one of her allies got captured and was sent to the dream world, and it's just like, wow, I have like the perfect life and stuff, but there was still this emptiness, I guess, like having all this happiness
Huh.
had, and she quickly realized that living in a dream world isn't necessarily the best thing for you. Like,
Huh.
it can be helpful for a time. I think in the short run it's okay, but in the long run it's not going to help you at all, because essentially you're running away from your problems and not facing it head on. Uh,
Oh.
at least
Very
that's
sad.
what I can remember, because I watched it a very, very long time ago, but it definitely left a very strong impression on me in terms of just like, oh, if let's just say you were stuck in a dream world for pretty much the rest of your life and everything that you wanted actually happened. Would you want that?
Ooh, that is a good question because, like, where I am right now, I would almost say, like, I'm almost living a dream because everything that I'm doing, I really enjoy. I'm married to the girl that I really love. Everything's happy. And to make a reversal of that, it's like if you found out that what you're living right now, Rave, is a dream world, and you have to wake up, and when you wake up, your wife is not your wife. Well, what you're doing right now is not what you're really doing. Everything is like sucky, but that's reality. You have to face it. Would you want to wake up from your dream right now? Um, oh, I mean, like, obviously, I hope this isn't a dream. If it is, then oh man, that sucks. Would it be better if I knew it was a dream? Um, oh man, that is a good question. I will say, like, cause a part of me does feel like, yeah, like, I would want to stay here, rather than wake up to the reality of things. And I guess it's also very nuanced because what if that reality is an extreme reality, like something really, really terrible? Like there was like a horror space movie that I watched. I'll keep it short, but they think they're living in a paradise, but then they wake up, they realize they've been cryogenically frozen, and they're really in like the hive of a spider nest, and the spiders have been harvesting their life energy the whole time. And the guy wakes up and he just screams and screams and screams, and he realizes he's basically in like alien hell, and that's the end of that's the end of the show. And it's like, oh my god, that's 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 terrible. He should have been left in his paradise. Um, but would I want to know the truth? Is me wanting to know the truth, would it be worth it at that point? And I feel like everybody has a line that if they cross, it wouldn't be worth it. I think that's my take on it. It's like there's a specific line, and if it crosses this line, then no. But otherwise, yes, kind of thing. Like I would want to know the truth, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you throw away your current happiness for the truth? That's essentially what the question boiled down to.
Right. How about yourselves, both of you?
I would. I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind them personally. Like I would want to know the truth because that's how I am as a person.
Even if the truth is what Rave just mentioned in terms of that you're actually in some kind of like horrible alien spider nest.
Yeah. Even if I was being harvested for life energy, like even if I was, imprisoned in the deepest cages of hell or whatever, like I would want to know just because, like, what did I do to get into this situation? Like, I want to know. I'm curious.
Ooh, man, that is a hard wow. That's wow. I don't think I have the same amount of guts as you do when it comes to that. Major props to you. I apparently if it got that far, that's kind of where I draw the line. No, I wouldn't want that.
My curiosity is definitely a lot more impactful, I guess. If that's probably not the proper word, but
right. Wow. Well,
I mean, personally for me, I think I'm semi-similar to Okakura in that it's like I would be happy about knowing of the fact that I'd be in some alien spider nest or something like that, right? But I wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be like the end of the world for me. I think I would be crazy, and yes, I'd be like, what the heck's going on for a while, of course, but it's like, knowing that I'd prefer to know it just because then it's like I can actually do things that are more correct to my situation.
Oh my gosh. You guys are crazy. You guys are crazy. What am I in? Maybe I am in a space alien colony and you guys are the spiders. Yes, figure it out. We're here to harvest you. Like, no. Um, wow. That so finding out the truth means
I
more
mean,
to you than that.
I mean,
Yeah.
gave you more concrete example. Think of, for instance, the Promise, no, that anime. I think it was the Promise Neverland,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Have you watched The
where
Promised
that
Neverland,
orphanage
Graham?
looked all. That orphanage was all nice and everything, right?
Yeah.
I've heard of it, and I think I remember the premise of it. Like a bunch of kids are being raised in an orphanage, but then a couple of them want to break out, and
Oh,
then they discover that
Yes.
everything outside the orphanage is kind of screwed up.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I would be of the kids that wanted to break out just because like there's to me there's no such thing as a perfect life. There's definitely
right,
stuff
right, right.
close to it,
Hmm.
but I think as a person, I like striving for more.
Hmm.
Like I want to know, like what's going to be the next big thing? What's going to be the next step I'm going to take to kind of better my life or whatever. So even if the path before me is thorny, treacherous, I could end up freaking losing my life or whatever. Like it would make me feel a lot better knowing that I tried to kind of better my situation in any way, shape, or form I could, because I guess that's how I would reward myself
Uh-huh.
in terms of like that gives me happiness and satisfaction, like knowing that I believe I made the choice to hopefully improve my situation. Like essentially, like I guess the best example is my financial situation. I would like to believe that I'm doing very well financially now, and that if I keep it up, that I can actually start hitting bigger numbers and be a part of the wealthy class, stuff like that, and that would bring me great joy. But being a little bit more realistic, it's just like, well, it'd be a lot easier if I had a higher paying job, like if I had more streams of income, stuff like that. Like I know that truth, but it's just like there are definitely other circumstances that would prevent me from doing that, and obviously one of them is just myself, because maybe I'm just not comfortable going outside my comfort zone, even though I've mentioned before that I would you know I would want to wake up and discover I'm an alienist. So I guess it just really depends on if I can kind of push myself both emotionally and physically. Well, not really physically, but I guess more of the mental aspect of myself, and just kind of accepting and being more open to, maybe I am a little scared of moving out of my comfort zone.
Hmm.
But if it comes down to it, I can do it.
Huh.
Like I don't mind, because I know I can't really be in that dream world state like forever. Like eventually something is going to change.
This kind of
And
reminds me of another anime, Sword Art Online, and it's always that same floor. What was it? 45? 25?
22
22?
if you're talking about the
Ironclad?
about the freaking Kirito and Asuna just living just a quiet, calm life with their quote unquote kid.
Right.
Uh, and when they get called back on the front lines, like I guess I would be in that situation. Like I would prefer living on floor 22, but if the time comes where I have to, I have to prepare for war, I have to go back out on the front lines and put myself at risk, I don't mind doing it, because I guess knowing that I have a floor 22 to potentially come back to would be nice. And though I guess in that case, like logging out of the game, um, and actually going back to real life, like we would want that, because I don't want to be a freaking vegetable in my bed.
Right.
I would want to, uh, like, even though SAO as a world is actually very compelling. Like, I honestly really love the world, and I would want to stay in it. But at the same time, it's just like, well, what about my real life body? Like, I can't really leave it out there and have freaking all these tubes stuck in me and like have them have me on life support. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I'll enjoy what I have at the moment, but you'll come to a point where you kind of have to do something. Like, I guess your relationship. Like, I don't think there was a point where you could still keep it the way it was. Either you two got married, which you two did, or you two would break up. But you guys ended up getting married, and that's great. Like, I think that's how I perceive things will happen in any given situation. Like, things will slowly start moving, and I just want to be prepared for whatever happens when it happens.
Wow. Yeah, I see. So I think that was an excellent way to kind of like close off, the topic. You know, um, personally, I'll say this. I guess it really does come down to the question of, the truth might be a really tough pill to swallow. What is your capacity of like swallowing the pill, regardless of how much it might hurt you or how much it might scare you? Are you still able to do it? And for both of you guys, the answer is you would rather know the truth than to live a more comfortable lie.
Yep,
That would
pretty
be my
much.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are brave. I'll be honest. I feel like I can only do that to an extent, but hopefully, by the end of when I finish reading this book, or maybe like going through this more, it'll you know make me see like, okay, maybe no matter what, it's always good to find the truth no matter what. Huh.
Well, it's not really truth, but just being a bit more open to your situation. Like, that's it. Just just being a little bit more open minded to certain concepts and thoughts.
Right. Regardless of what truth they may shed, like, yeah, I see that. Cool. Well, all right, you guys. I think we'll wrap it up here. We've actually been here for about an hour, 30 minutes. We were already kind of closing off in an hour mark, but we started getting pretty deep. So I was like, you know what, let's just keep going a little bit. But thanks for joining me here. You know, you guys had some really interesting thoughts and insights. So thank you, and yeah, we'll see what happens when we put this out. So thanks again, you guys. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, no problem.